Hello, I'm John Adams of Phillips. Today I'm with my dad, Mr. Chris Adams, to discuss his 42 years in the industry and bring a close to our educational series. So thanks, Dad, for doing this today.
Hello.
Firstly, I know you very well. For those people who might be watching this who don't know you, when did you get involved in the industry and how did you get involved in the industry?
Chris Adams. Adams. Dad's Bob Adams and old Bridgnorth family, well, Worthfield family. I was born in Bridgnorth Infirmary. I went to Worthfield School. When I left school, I wanted to be a vet. Didn't go down that route, and like lots of people in those days, didn't go to university. And then I went off for the Royal Navy, had a few years with them. And then in 1978, my dad phoned me up out of the blue and said, I was very happy, I had a great career with the Navy. I was very happy, doing lots of interesting and exciting things. And he said, would you like to come and join the business? And I thought about it for a moment or two, and I said, okay. And 42 years later, here I am.
Good.
When I came into the business in 79, I knew absolutely nothing about the industry. I'd helped my dad over the years. I'd helped him in the coffin shop and done odd jobs with him and done the odd removal when I was a kid. But I knew nothing about the fuel industry. However, within the first week, I'd sacked all his bearers for a whole variety of reasons I won't bore you with. And I do think he probably thought at that time, what have I done bringing him into the business?
Why did I ask him?
Yes, why did I ask him? But we brought in new people with a slightly different approach to it.
Yeah.
And even in those days, I suppose with my Navy training, I was able to instill management into the system.
Yeah.
And some structure and some standards.
I suppose that's when the standards started to grow, really.
Yeah. I did an apprenticeship with the company, really. I did the grave digging, I did all the coroner's work, I did the out-of-hours removals. I did all the stuff that nobody else really wanted to do in those days, but it was a fabulous foundation for me, because no grave digger can tell me he can't dig a grave because I've been there and done it.
Yeah.
I remember digging a grave up on the top of the Clee Hill. On one occasion. It took me 2.5 days to dig a single grave. It was snowing, the snow was going horizontally, it was cold, it was bitterly cold. And I remember getting on my knees in the bottom of the grave in tears, saying to myself, why? Why did I agree to come and do this? So it was a good grounding. And I was very lucky with my dad, really, that he was able to accommodate me when I came back into the business. Lots of new ideas to raise those standards. In those days, people didn't wear their own clothing. They weren't dressed in their own clothing. They had a shroud.
Yeah, a gown.
A gown. My dad's view, because they're traditional, was you had a choice of gowns, a choice of colours. You could have a white one, or you could have a white one.
Okay.
And one of the reps turned up here while he was away one day, and I purchased all sorts of colours, different colours and styles and whatever, took them into the coffin workshop and stacked them away. And that was the end of the matter, really. And then one of my dad's best friends passed away, very sadly. And we made the coffin, and I had a chocolate brown shroud, which I know sounds pretty tacky today, but it was lovely. It was a beautiful gown. And I thought, that'll just do the job. So we lined the coffin, placed the lid on. We had to take the coffin home the night before to put this person in. And Dad and I arrived, and he made all the usual niceties with the family at the time, and we took the coffin upstairs and put it in the bedroom, took the lid off, and I thought he was going to have a stroke when he saw this brown linings and brown robe. He went absolutely ballistic, and we had a full-scale, full-blown row in silence in the bedroom just above where these dear souls were downstairs. And he went ballistic. He went absolutely ballistic. Could not believe I hadn't used a white shroud. Yeah. Anyway, there was nothing we could do, we couldn't change it. So we very carefully placed the gentleman in the coffin and we dressed him. And I was very crestfallen, heartbroken I was, because I thought I'd done a wonderful job. And we placed the coffin on the trestles at the side of the bed, and he, just get out. So I went and stood out on the landing, absolutely crestfallen, tail between my legs, and he brought the widow who he was great friends with up the stairs. And as they went into the bedroom, I heard her say to him, "Oh Bob, you put him in brown, his favourite colour." And my dad said, "Yes, I know, that's why I chose it." And that conversation was never discussed. We got into the removal ambulance and came back to us. He never apologised, I never said anything, but I had a little smile on my face for a few days.
Was it a long drive home, was it?
It was, and that was another example of he never questioned that again.
Yeah.
He was very accepting of all the changes that I wanted to bring into the company, and he was very accepting of the rising of the standards.
I think you probably realised that you were doing it for the right reasons.
Well, I think so. I think again, going back to the 60s and 70s, it wasn't quite like this, but I mean, funerals were arranged on the back of a cigarette packet.
Yeah.
Not quite on the back of a cigarette, but you know what I mean. And people weren't asked what sort of coffin do you want, or what do you want them dressed in, or how do you want to do this, that,
It was just done a certain way.
You went to the funeral director and he sorted it out.
Yeah, they just got the date and times fixed for you.
Yeah.
We'll see you then.
Yeah, and the vicar will sort out the hymns that you want. And there was very little choice. It was, this is what happened, this is what happened. And so Dad was very good. I mean, I will, until my dying day, I will always say that the standards that we've got here now are only because he allowed me to do that.
So Dad, you've been doing this now for 42 years in this industry. Firstly then, what are the biggest changes that you've seen in that time?
Well, the industry has just changed out of all recognition to the one I came into in 1979. And I think it just reflects really the society that we live in. The community in which we live has changed out of all recognition. When I was a lad, Bridge North was a small community, we knew everybody. It's now a big town. In those days, when a bereavement occurred, it was almost unheard of not to have a religious funeral, to a greater or lesser extent. The community, the death would be a community occasion. Neighbours, friends. In those days you would be born in Bridge North, you'd be educated in Bridge North, you'd marry in Bridge North, you'd work in Bridge North, you'd die in Bridge North. People didn't travel, everybody knew everybody. It was very much more community based, and religion played a big part in your life. Today, we're in a completely different place.
So, with that religious funerals then, why do you think we're seeing a sort of change, a shift? What do you think the reasons for that are?
As people have moved around and Bridge North has grown and expanded, lots of new people have come to live here, and they brought with them their requirements. They brought with them the standards that they're used to from the communities that they used to live in. Different religions, no religion. 14% of funerals last year, direct cremation. You have to ask about why do you do a funeral service?
Yeah.
What is the point of a funeral service?
Yeah.
It can be a costly exercise, not always, but it can be a costly exercise. Emotionally, you're arranging things at a time when really you're being asked questions at the wrong time.
Yeah.
Decisions are having to be made at the wrong time. You've got to let go of somebody that you love. So why do we do all this stuff? And where I sit, a funeral service is held for a variety of reasons. It's held, if we have a God, we can thank our God for that life. We can celebrate the life, we can think about them, we can mourn them. People tend to forget today in this very false world that we live in, that mourning is quite an acceptable part of this process.
Yeah.
We can think about our own mortality. There isn't a single funeral service I go to where I don't at some point think to myself, my God, this is going to be me one day.
Yeah.
We can allow neighbours, friends, all sorts of people, work colleagues, all sorts of people can come along and support us, at least when the conditions allow us to, post-COVID. But the bottom line of every funeral service is that physically we have to let somebody go. And it's how we do that, and it's what we expect from doing that. And my counsel to most of my clients is to let them go with love and with thought and with dignity and with thanks. Each bereavement is different. Every single relationship on this planet is unique. So consequently, whenever we lose anybody, it's a unique experience. Only you know. You lose your wife, you lose your husband, you lose your children, you lose your parents. There will always be somebody who comes along and puts their arm around you who's gone through a similar experience, and they'll say, I know exactly how you're feeling. I know exactly, I lost my whoever. And the reality is, no, they don't know how you're feeling. They know how they feel.
Yeah.
Because that relationship is so unique. And quite often, forgiveness is an important part of what we do in a funeral service. Sometimes we need to forgive them, sometimes we need to forgive ourselves, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Very early on in my professional life, I arranged a Buddhist funeral, one of the first Buddhist funerals I ever arranged, and we were very lucky. We had a treble slot at Bushbury Crematorium because the service went on for nearly 2 hours. We were very lucky because we had a series of monks that came, Buddhist monks that came, and one of them was an English guy who would stop the service every now and again and explain what all the chanting and rituals were about. And he stopped the ceremony at one particular point. He said, "Now I want you all to close your eyes and bring this person into your minds," which they did. And he said, "Now," he said, "I want you to forgive them. I want you to say it's okay for anything that they've done that's offended you or has upset you in any way, let that go." And there was a few moments of pause. And then he said, "Now bring them back into your mind." And now he said, "I want you to ask them to forgive you for anything that you may have done that's offended them." And I remember thinking at the time, you know, this is quite powerful stuff. This is really the bottom line of what all these funeral services are about.
And that's another example, again, you say on about the population and communities changing. Those, obviously, that Buddhist funeral that you attended, we're seeing more of that now in civil funerals.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's an example of how it's a positive thing, really.
My dad would never have arranged a Buddhist funeral, and my granddad and great-granddad wouldn't have known what one was. Yeah. Going back to 79, as I said to you earlier, you know, religious funerals were the thing. That's what you did. Yeah. To a greater or lesser extent. You would either go to church, followed by burial or cremation, and have a full religious ceremony, or we're not terribly religious, so we just go to the crematorium and we do a very light religious ceremony for them. There were always tame priests that we could get to do that. The situation today is that we've gone from that, where it was all religious services, to like segments of an orange, really. We've gone from a religious service to humanist services. So humanist services came online, totally non-religious, a sort of this is your life, a celebration of the life and times of the person that's passed away with absolutely not a smidgen of religion in it. Yeah. And that has now evolved into what we refer to as a civil funeral service. Yeah. And the only way, people say, well, what's a civil funeral service, Chris? And the only way that I can describe a civil funeral service is totally non-religious. Yeah. But with a bit of religion in it. Yeah. So it's a sort of this is your life with the Lord's Prayer and perhaps a hymn. And that actually, for a lot of families, means they've got a foot in both camps. They've got a little bit of religion just to be on the safe side, but really we want to go down the non-religious route. And it works well for lots of people. And I'm finding, and as I'm sure we all are here, that more and more funerals are going down the civil route. Yeah. Just on this subject then, there's been like more media awareness now of alternative funeral directors. So the thing like the Buddhist funeral that you attended, and obviously the services we offer, what is an alternative funeral director compared to a traditional one, if that is even a thing? What is the difference? Well, we've always been alternative. Yeah. We've always been offered alternative funerals. So I suppose because you were doing like home burials like 30 years ago, it's not actually a new thing. No, I remember my very first one. My very first home burial, we had to make arrangements for a little grave in a wood, and I organised the gravedigger to come and join me, and he was very suspicious as he got out of his truck, I remember, and gazing at me, you know, not quite sure whether this is an April Fool prank or what. Thought you gone mad? Thought I'd gone completely lost it, yeah. So he got his planks and all his bits and pieces and put them in the wheelbarrow, and off we went across this field, over a couple of barbed wire fences up towards this hill with a wood on it. And he plonked the wheelbarrow down and he said, "Okay, you've got me. Really, where is it?" And I said, "Really, where it is? It's up there in the wood." And off we went. But it wasn't just that, it was the enormity of looking into the legal situation, because nobody knew. Back in 1980, 81, when I did my first home burial, no, who do I speak to? You speak to the registrar. No, it wasn't a coroner, didn't want to know. Nobody wanted to know, and the reality is it's evolved as we've gone on. But still now though, it's not a done thing. I know you've done them since, and still now, I'm just always surprised how sort of simple it is to do it. Very simple. And I mean, you can be buried wherever you want to, really, with with restrictions, I suppose. But it's just a question of taking the advice of your field director, and your field director taking the advice of the local council, environmental health, and ensuring that that there are no legal problems.
Again, with that as well, though, which is interesting, about cost of funerals now, there's big scrutiny on that. So, for example, Bridgnorth Town Cemetery, for non-parishioners, just for a burial plot down there could be sort of £3,000. For a home burial, other than the grave digging,
there is no charge.
I think. So that's probably something to look at.
Absolutely. We, as you know, are interested in our own green burial site, which we're looking into at the moment. And that will be a consideration. Cost again, there will be a consideration.
Hopefully we can try and bring those amount of people having cremation, because it's cost driven, hopefully give them more choice on burial as well.
Well, currently I think, and I haven't got the exact figures, so this is off the top of my head really, but I think we're looking at about 75-76% of all deaths in the United Kingdom going down the cremation route. And a lot of that is to do with cost.
Cost driven.
You know, we can go to the crematorium for £900, or we can go to the local cemetery for £3,500. Well, it's a no-brainer, isn't it, really?
But then sometimes they don't realise to have the ashes buried in that cemetery can cost extraordinary amounts as well.
Amount of money as well.
So
but there are lots of alternatives with the disposal of cremated remains that people can now do, which again you couldn't do back in '79. It wasn't done.
No, that's interesting, Dad. So also then something else which is got lots of attention at the moment, and rightly so, is the environment and funerals. We discussed this with the Life Art Coffin Company, and they're doing this eco-friendly coffin. On a sort of wider scale, where do you see that going? How do you see it affecting funerals? How do you see it affecting everything?
Well, I think again we're looking at particularly at younger people today. I mean, youngsters at school, even at primary school, who are becoming more and more environmentally aware. And practices that went on again back in the 70s and 80s, you just couldn't do it today. You just wouldn't not do it today. But as these younger people are coming through, they're demanding change. They're demanding change. A few years ago, we had a major issue with some of the crematorium, with all the crematorium really, with a European ruling that was brought in with regard to mercury abatement, just the mercury in people's fillings. And they'd worked out that over the years, we're talking about tons of mercury that was being discharged into the environment around these crematorium, tons of it. So mercury abatement was a classic example that had to be filtered out. I can see that cremation is going to be with us for a long time, but there are now alternatives. Water cremation, resonation, water cremation, and lots of new ideas. And it's like over the last 42 years how things have changed. It will continue to change.
And evolve,
And the environment has got to be very much a consideration in the way that the fuel industry moves forward. It has to be.
So they're saying 2030, all vehicles to be electric. I'm not sure that's going to work for funeral directors with vehicles. If it will have to be all vehicles, we'll have to wait and see. I know the manufacturers of hearses in the United Kingdom are starting to convert some of their cars now or produce electric vehicles.
Even with regard to what we do here and what fuel directors do up and down the country with regard to embalming and the control of substances and discharge of waste. It's all going to have to be considered very, very carefully. But of course there's a cost factor involved in that.
With the cost factors as well, that brings me on to our next video we did, and that was with the NEFD CEO John Levitt. We discussed about regulation, licensing, the Competition Market Authority. So how do you think that's going to affect us? Do you think it's going to be a positive thing? Do you think it's going to have issues? Do you think it's a thing that just needs to happen? Where do you stand with it all?
All of those things, I think. The standards have got to be raised throughout the industry, and the quality of the service has got to be raised. But it's about the dignity. It's about the dignity of how you deal with the family, and it's about the dignity of the deceased. It isn't just about the shop window and how smart the office is. When we had people here, and I was responsible for training them, whenever they came to do their first removal, I used to just have a little conversation with them before we moved anybody. And I would go to move the person. I'd say, well, just hang on for a second, just have a little think, shall we? And they'd sort of look at me, and I'd say, let's think about this carefully. think of, first of all, let's consider that one day this is going to be you. Now, I don't know about how you want to be handled, but I certainly know how I want to be handled, and I want to be handled with some love and some dignity and some care. So that's the first thing. And the second thing I used to say to them, which always made them look over their shoulder, is I used to say, well, of course, we don't know for sure, but this person could actually be stood watching us do this now. So let's try and get it right for them as well, shall we?
Yeah,
there was always a sort of glance over the shoulder at that point. But I tried to instill into people in those days the importance, the dignity of the way that people are looked after, the way they're cared for and handled. It's paramount.
Yeah. I think you've sort of that, you've ingrained it into everybody here, to myself as well, about how we take care of people behind the scenes.
And it's taking time.
Yeah.
It's taking time with the deceased, it's taking time with the families.
Yeah.
Vitally important. One of the things about this profession that I've never really understood, it amazes me every time I think about it. I know lots of local families who will spend 2 years planning a wedding to get it absolutely right.
Yeah.
I know lots of other families, certainly, who will spend months planning all sorts of other family occasions. Christenings, 21st birthday parties, 50th wedding anniversaries, holidays, Christmas, months in the planning. And yet we come to a bereavement and we've got to get the thing done and dusted in about a week.
Yeah.
And I try to instill in people that they don't have to do it that way. I mean, yes, it's something that we need to do for closure and to get to the other side of this, but there's no rush.
Yeah.
There's no rush. I'm always interested that someone will pass away. You can be married for 60 years living with somebody and they pass away, it doesn't matter what time of the day, I want to move now.
Yeah.
And I say to people, are you sure this is what you want? We haven't got to move this person straight away. Enjoy them while you've got them.
I think that's interesting, that, because I think people think we need to go straight away, yeah. And that's, again, you've always offered that service where take your time.
Yeah.
There's no rush.
And it's also about reassurance. It's about reassuring that client. You know, we haven't got a magic wand. We can't make it all okay. But what we can do is we can reassure them that we're going to do our best for them and our best for the deceased, and that we can build a good foundation for them to move forward from. And if we get that bit right, it's horrible. Yeah. Bereavement is horrible, and a funeral service is dreadful for people. But if we can get all that right for them, and they can let that person go with those things that we've talked about: love, dignity, thought, respect, thanks, it makes the next bit just that little bit easier.
Yeah.
Because what we try to do is that when we leave that crematorium or that cemetery or wherever it is, that field or wherever it is that they had their service, that when we move away from there, I want all my clients to look back on that occasion and think to themselves, yeah, we got that right.
Yeah. Good.
Not, oh, I wish we'd done this, or I wish we'd done that, or I wish we hadn't done this or that, because we can only do it once. Yeah. You've got to get this right first time.
So back to regulation then, that's what the core values are here, but then like the regulation side of things, do you think it will affect that at all? Do you think it'll have any negative effects on how we do things at all? Or do you think it'll just make us stronger?
It'll hone those, hopefully that's the plan. It will hone it and sharpen it and make it more professional for people.
Yeah.
But while we want things to be professional, we don't want to lose sight of the personal aspect of what we do.
Yeah.
So yes, we want to be professional, but we still want to be able to put an arm around them and cry with them, as I have done on many occasions, and share with them.
I think back to the start of this conversation was about how the communities in which we all live are changing. And I think despite people will know Grandad, yourself, it's about, I think now it needs to be more than that. And for people that come into the Original who don't know you or don't know Grandad, it's about having that extra layer of safety blanket, isn't it, really? And that's what the standard, and that's what regulation hopefully will provide for people. Is like, regardless if they know you or not, there's no trust there because they don't know you. It's just, there's a standard there regardless, and that surely should be it.
We've based, not just us, I mean, most funeral homes, most funeral directors, most funeral companies have based their professional standards on trust.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we're no longer living in the 1950s, are we? That's the problem that we've got. And there will be charlatans and people who just set up and willy-nilly, and the standards have got to be maintained. They've got to be maintained to the highest possible level, but they've got to be improved. We've always got to go beyond that. And we should strive to do that, not just here but everywhere. All funeral directors should strive to do that on every occasion. We're only as good as our last funeral. No good about how marvellous we were in the 1970s or 80s. It's what we do now, and we have to keep those standards. Every time that those vehicles go out of our gates onto a funeral service, it's vital that we do our very best. We don't, and sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes I remember on one occasion I had a vicar who collapsed and died in the middle of the service. It's not in the manual. What do I do now? I thought, it's not in the manual. We've had flat tyres, we've had bust-ups and fights at funerals. We've had all sorts of circumstances that's not in the manual. But above all else, we keep going. We're a bit like the swan, aren't we, on the river? You know, we're serene and we're in control of the situation. Possibly underneath, we're paddling like mad, because sometimes circumstances throw themselves at you that you've just got to deal with.
No control over.
But ultimately, the standards have got to be right. We've got to be able to deal with those situations. Educational, from the educational standards within the funeral industry, the standards of the staff, the way they deal with people, the facilities that we offer, our vehicles. It's all the way we deal with the deceased, the way we look after the deceased. It's a great privilege. I don't think people realise what a wonderful privilege it is to be asked to look after somebody. To be asked to look after somebody's loved one. To take them away from that family, to bring them here. That's why our facilities have got to be second to none. And so, but legislation to ensure that, I think it's imperative.
It's not to hinder people, is it? No. That's the idea of it.
It's not to hold people back. It's to bring all funeral directors forward. It's to make sure everybody raises their game. For the general public. So when the general public, doesn't matter who they ring, whichever funeral director they decide to use, whoever gets that privilege, they know that the standards are right.
Moving on then, COVID-19, do you think there's going to be long-term effects on funerals? Do you think it's a good thing or bad thing? What do you see for the future of funerals following what's happened?
Well, what I would say about COVID-19 is that it's tragic from the funeral industry's point of view that people have not been permitted to do the things they want to do, all those things that we've talked about in a funeral service. The numbers at funeral services, I mean, in the early days it was 6, I think, at the very beginning. Crematorium numbers went up, and then they went down, then went up again, and they've moved them round again, and we're now sort of a maximum of 30 people at a funeral service. I don't think the general public realise that when we say 30 people at a funeral service, we don't mean 30 people at a funeral service plus 85 outside. It's 30 people, end of. People gathering outside a venue for a funeral service is deemed an illegal gathering, and is subject to the police coming and a fine of up to £10,000 for the event organiser, who sadly tends to be the funeral director. So people need to know that. But I understand that need to go to express all those things we've talked about, and it's tragic that people haven't been allowed to do that. People haven't been allowed to have a post-funeral reception. And that's a very big part of the day, getting together afterwards to chat and to talk about the deceased. Do you remember when? Do you remember when they did this? Do you remember when they did that? A few tears. A lot of laughter, we hope. And the ability to share and to break some ice so that when next time you meet those people, it's all been said and done and put to bed and they can all move on with their lives. I think most funeral directors have been tremendously innovative in some of the things they've come up with. Zoomcasts now and webcasts of services are quite a common thing to do, which was something would never happen before. Nearly everybody has a webcast now. DVDs of the services, recordings of the services, routes and routing of funeral cortèges past old houses, down old streets where people will run, past the old factory, past the... It's become very much more a thing to do, to try and involve as many people as possible, bearing in mind social distancing at all times. So it'll be interesting to see where we go with the industry, but as we've said about the industry changing over the past 42 years, this will be another of the innovations that we have to now adapt our services to move forward with.
So you and I have talked about, though, how some of the positives have been, how it's sort of stripped it back almost. It's back to the values which you talked about right at the start.
Most definitely.
That's been there more, isn't it, I think?
Most definitely, and it's made it very much more personal.
Yeah.
For families, it's very much more intimate ceremonies.
Yeah.
But again, for a larger group of people, the fact that they can't go to these services, and for some families to feel robbed of having that facility of being able to have family and friends around them and to support them, it's been hard.
Last question to ask you then, Dad, really. Talked about sort of what, you know, when you started in industry, the values of yourself and sort of Perry and Phillips as a whole. The future, where do you see it going? What do you want to achieve in the future? Do you have goals for the business or the service we offer? It's just remain as it is. What do you want to achieve for Perry and Phillips?
Well, I think about how the industry's changed in my time, and I have absolutely no doubt that over the next 42 years it's going to change a lot more. But my overriding passion about this, because I haven't got a job here, I haven't got a job, I have a way of life.
Yeah.
A minimum working week for me, 70, 75 hours. Most weeks it's 100 plus hours a week. But it's a passion. It isn't something that I've got to do. It's something I do because I'm passionate about it. And it's to maintain those standards. It's to maintain the quality of the service that we offer, which we strive to do. We don't always succeed, but we do strive hard to do. And it's to maintain those standards for the clients, to look after the deceased, and really, however big this company goes and whichever direction the funeral industry goes, that's got to be the bottom line of everything that we do.
Yeah.
Maintaining the standards, maintaining the dignity,
The care.
maintaining the care, maintaining the choice,
Yeah.
the reassurance to people that it will all be all right.
Have you enjoyed it, Dad, your 42 years? Have you actually enjoyed
Hated it, hated every minute of it. No, I've loved every second of it. Can't think of anything I would rather do.
Yeah.
It's interesting when people come into this industry. People will come and say, we'd like to, a job or whatever. And they normally are here for 2 or 3 days and we never see them again. Or they come into the industry and it gets under their skin.
Yeah.
And they're here forever, we can't get rid of them. And there's 1 or 2 members of staff who we just simply can't get rid of them. They've been here, worked for my dad, So, and he retired, 25 years ago, yeah. So it's an amazing industry. It's an amazing industry.
No, thanks, Dad.
I'd just like to say that there aren't many days, or nights I should say, when I don't get into bed at the end of the day. And I work a 7-day week most weeks. But there aren't many days when I don't get into bed at the end of the day and turn the light out. And that little time between turning the light out and going to sleep, when you reflect on the day, and there aren't many days when I don't think to myself, good day today. Good day today.